Dear ladies and gentlemen, it's a great pleasure to be here, and it's also my great pleasure to acknowledge that the introductory words from the land government were exactly like written from the WHO man's speech. So I think I have a bit much more easier task now, because a lot of the good words have been said, and of course the Millennium Development Goals, which WHO is always referring to, and of course we are now moving to another agenda item, which is saying universal health coverage. And again, also for the universal health coverage, you can't imagine yet you can achieve it without really substantial input from health products, notably medicines, vaccines, and also probably diagnostics. So I'm trying to put forward a bit some of the thoughts, and I have to make a disclaimer that they are my own thoughts and they don't necessarily represent the views of the WHO. Now, first of all, I'm showing you the WHO. WHO is an interesting organization in a way that it's a specialized agency, UN family, dealing with health problems, and it has one little difficulty. It has 193 member states owning it, and it's like, you know, it's sometimes difficult to be a kid for two parents, because they may have difficulty of having the same view. Now, imagine to be a kid of 193 parents. It's much more difficult task. And as a secretariat, of course, we are very much trying to do a good job of being a good kid for the 193 parents. Now, WHO is not only its headquarters, and this is also sometimes a bit of misperception that WHO is in Geneva. No, WHO is not so much in Geneva. It has 6 regional offices, and it has also a lot of country offices which are marked as asterisks, and the country offices may be really very small with one person show, but it may be also offices like 50 people, so depending on the country. So there is substantial amount of WHO staff outside Geneva, closer to the countries and closer where we have to be. Now, what are the WHO's activities in the field of health products regulation, including medicines, biologicals, vaccines, medical devices? It's very shortly setting policies, norms and standards for access, for rational use, for quality, safety, and efficacy. It's also assessment of national regulatory authorities, systems, regulatory support and capacity building, promoting regulatory harmonization and information exchange about safety, quality, and best practices. Also sometimes sending out rapid alerts, as we did recently in the case of the tainted API used in Pakistan, which ended up 55 plus people dead. And also, of course, assuring safety and quality of selected products for United Nations family through pre-qualification programs for medicines, vaccines, and diagnostics. Now, of course, WHO is also mandated to develop and establish and promote international standards with respect to food, biological, pharmaceutical, and similar products. And I must say that in certain areas, WHO normative activities, norms and standards are very much complementary to the norms and standards issued by other organizations, and in some cases very unique and also very much tuned to the topic we are discussing here today. And these standards are established through expert committee mechanisms. Now, assessing national medicines regulatory systems is also, I'm coming back to later to that, is very close to our heart, because we see that the national regulatory authorities are very important players in local production. There are no good regulators around. It's very difficult to have good quality sustainable production. And we have specific assessment tools for that, which we are continuously, of course, improving and trying to get it better tuned to build the capacities. It's also, we have very much linked in with working with the national regulators. Every second year we are organizing the biggest meeting of regulators in the global scenery, bringing together more than 100 nations. And this is for promoting information, best practices exchange, cooperation, harmonization. And many of these initiatives and talks amongst the regulators have also clear impact to the agenda we are talking here today. The last ICTRA was held in Europe. It's traveling all around the world. It was held in Tallinn, in Estonia, by the Estonian agency, hosted, and the recommendations are already up and on the website available. The next actually will be hosted by Anvisa from Brazil in 2014. Now, there is also some other harmonizations ongoing. It's also quite interesting that in nowadays world, there is so much disharmony. People are talking about harmonization, but if you look how the real things are, there is a lot of disharmony. And one of the things where there is a lot of disharmony still is actually pharmacopoeias. One of the key components of ensuring the quality, but still all the major pharmacopoeias left. There have some harmonization between the US pharmacopoeia, Japanese and European pharmacopoeia, but then there are Chinese, Indian, Brazilian pharmacopoeia, and WHO recently took initiative to bring all the major global pharmacopoeias together and try to look if there could be some further alignment, convergence and harmonization be achieved. Then there is, of course, WHO pre-qualification program, which I'm not putting much effort to elaborate further at this stage, but going to the essential medicines. Essential medicines concept is one of the key concepts that World Health Organization has been introducing, and probably one of the most successful initiatives ever started. And essential medicines are those that satisfy the priority healthcare needs of the population. They are selected with due regard to public health relevance, evidence on efficacy and safety, and comparative cost effectiveness. And actually we are having the next expert committee deciding on the selection of essential medicines coming up in this April, with a lot of controversy already now in place, because some people start already now discussing what should be included, what should not be included, and there are some quite interesting new products on the product group's horizon. Essential medicines are also intended to be available within the context of functioning health systems at all times in adequate amounts, in the appropriate dosage forms, with assured quality and adequate information, and at a price the individual and the community can afford. And also access to essential medicines is, you could look at it as a human right and as an indispensable part of universal health coverage. Then, of course, access to essential medicines where we are. Actually, it remains still to be a bit, well, I would say a big problem, because we are more focused recently on the communicable diseases. But if you start to move into non-communicable diseases, you can see also very striking gaps in accessibility and access to the essential medicines. I would bring some of the examples, like mental health. In some countries, access to the mental health products is probably less than 30% of what is needed. If you take the access to the products which are needed to ensure the maternal and child health, again, in some parts of the world, it's the minority who gets the access and the majority who doesn't. And if you take the chronic diseases like cardiovascular diseases, a lot of preventable harm, disability, also cost to the community that could be prevented. And if to translate into the money terms, it's huge waste of resource, because we can't invest little to avoid this big waste of resource which indirectly these disabilities cause. So there is still a huge unfinished agenda getting better access to the essential medicines. Now, concept of local production, I would make here the reference to my good colleague, Dr. Zafar Mirza, who is leading the unit in our cluster. Now we are in the same cluster. WHO is also converging and making harmonization, getting better aligned. So the unit who is dealing mostly with the higher level problems of the local production and is running the project improving access to medicines in developing countries through technology transfer related to medical products and local production. This is in partnership with other UN family organizations, and we greatly appreciate, of course, the funding from the European Union that has made this project available. Having said that, there is also, of course, support from other units with other activities, and we should look at all as one package. Now, of course, I would refer also special website, which has been put up, local production for access to medical products. It has a lot of information resources available, and Zafar was, I saw, bringing some of the additional, making them available to you. Some relevant publications just listed, and not going to the detail, scrolling through, but then going to the chances for the developing countries and least developed countries in the context and for the local production. And I think we should always look to the world, because the world is changing more rapidly than we can sometimes change our policies and mind. And we are sometimes also very conservative in changing ourselves, but at the same time wanting to change the others. Now, old concepts do not hold. It's not anymore this what was formerly, oh, this is developing world, this is the developed world. This is past. Probably there are 3 power centers, I would say, for the pharmaceutical manufacturing with different logic and interest, but some convergence behind the scenes ongoing. It's old industrialized countries. It is the new emerging economies like India, China, Brazil, Russia, South Africa, and then lower middle income and low income countries, including African countries. And they all have some sort of a different background and logic. Now, old industrialized countries, excuse me for my saying so, substantial industrial capacity, not much dependent on local manufacture, less generic markets, base for research-based industries, consolidating into few giants with new functions. Nowadays, research-based industries are not anymore what they were 5 years ago, what they were 10 years ago. Many of them are turning themselves to the powerful marketing organizations, with contracting a lot of things out for the startups and other contractual partners. So it's a very different way of business model. Generic industries merging and going global. It's another trend. Formerly generic industries were, let's say, very much for the national markets or sub-regional markets. Nowadays is a clear trend going more and more global. And we can see it after a couple of years even more. Machinery, lab equipment, monopoly shifting away. It was that industrialized world had some sort of a monopoly. Now China producing production and lab equipment. Some of the actually industrial machinery is produced in China. Some people say they are copies, some say something else, but they are there. Increasing globalization and work sharing. Let's say today in Europe, if China and India will not supply any more API, tomorrow Europe will not have life-saving antibiotics, because a lot of life-saving antibiotics are not just anymore produced in Europe. We don't have API production anymore in Europe. It has been gone out all. There are very few pockets left in southern part of the Europe mostly, which are still doing API. So 80% API is coming from India and China today. Also a lot of excipients and packaging materials and other all type of auxiliary needs for the manufacturing. Contract manufacturing, increasingly done by India, but labeled made in Europe sometimes. Research and development, more and more in developing world. Clinical trials, massively going out. basic research slowly following. Now the next, new emerging economies. Increasing industrial capacity in many areas with needs for new markets. Still large generic markets, but with increasing share of originator products. Increasingly part of work sharing and taking over certain functions, API, excipients, packaging material, machinery, contract research, participating in global research and development, clinical trials, developing its own products, new originator products, there are already some initiatives, and generic industries developing and consolidating, going global, also merging with the industries in the first group of countries. And then we go to the last. Local manufacturing may be more important relatively in this group, mostly generic markets, much bigger dependence on outside country, region resources, some almost 100% depending on everything to be brought in to make something locally. Less part of the global research and development, but also moving in this direction. Less clinical trials, in some countries no CROs functioning, no participation in basic fundamental research. Generic companies usually small and not reaching further than country or sub-region. Many have either no or only limited industrial capacity, relatively lack of qualified human resources and knowledge base, less business freedom and less attractive investment environment. Local policies may disfavor even local manufacturing, and more problems with sometimes good governance. So this is sustainable local production in Africa. What it needs actually favorable environment and collaboration between countries and access to markets. Because production is not made for just somewhere. It has to have the market. No market, no production. No quality products market, no quality production. And this is local production in the center in global context, because we have to look on the local production from global context. And you can see that I have tried to put some of the favoring and enabling conditions around. I would start basics, good governance in pharmaceutical sector, modern laws and regulations, favoring environment, secure investment environment and business climate, taxes and customs, favorable health and industrial policies, very important. One of the keys, strong national regulatory authority, they must be also effective, knowledge-based and skilled workforce, infrastructure, roads, electricity, water supply, and some others what belong to that. Now, WHO position and experiences in the light of the access to essential medicines, local manufacturers may facilitate access, but it is not a goal in its own right. Dramatic quality problems have occurred recently. Locally produced essential medicines may be of lower quality and higher price. We have clear evidence for that. Healthcare providers and patients do not care whether the medicines come from, actually. They care that they are safe, of good quality and affordable. And this is what we have to keep also in mind. Some products likely more feasible for local production than others. And one of them is, by the way, blood products, because this is something that you can't do internationally very easily. You have to use local plasma for that. And also we are planning to have some more feasibility research in this direction to look what products are more probably feasible for the local production. And also last, locally produced medicines, that's also a key, must probably, at least in our aspirations, meet international standards for quality, safety and efficacy. Of course, there is risk-based step-by-step approach possible, but I would not say there is much of compromise on the final goal possible. Because finally, we want all to have good quality medicines, and I have always said, also poor people deserve good quality medicines. Thank you.